Today I want to teach you some kind of common misconceptions or misunderstandings when it comes to thyroid antibodies. So if you've been diagnosed with Hashimoto's or Graves' disease and they tell you you have positive thyroid antibodies, a lot of people don't understand what that means. And I get asked a lot of the time because there's kind of two different antibodies that typically come up when you have specifically Hashimoto's, which is your anti-thyroglobulin antibodies and your anti-TPO thyroid peroxidase antibodies. So today I'm going to teach you, just like I teach doctors all over the country, the difference between those two antibodies. But I think it's also really important that you understand how your thyroid hormones are made. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a science lesson today, but I hope it helps you understand your body better and what's going on with your thyroid, especially if you have Hashimoto's or an autoimmune thyroid condition. So let me take you through some science. You guys ready for this? I'm going to screen share you. All right, hopefully just looking at this makes your brain a little bit dizzy. But this is your thyroid hormone synthesis pathway. This is how every thyroid hormone in your thyroid gets made. And as I go through this in a little bit of an abbreviated version, you're gonna understand why those two antibodies can cause hypothyroid. Because if you didn't know, Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid issues are the #1 cause of hypothyroid, but it's so rarely tested that most people with hypothyroid have no idea that they have Hashimoto's. So let me explain how this works. So over here on the left, you have your iodine transport system. So every single thyroid hormone that you can make, so your T4 and your T3, are comprised of a tyrosine backbone. So we get tyrosine from cheeses and meats and chicken and fish. So most people have a pretty ample supply of tyrosine. But then that tyrosine has to bind iodine. So when the iodine gets bound to the tyrosine, depending how many iodines are on that tyrosine, that gives you your number. So a T4 thyroid hormone is a tyrosine with 4 iodines. A T3 is a tyrosine with 3 iodines. Follow me? So this is why that's important to know. So the iodine has to get taken into the cell, and it actually uses sodium. So you need good, healthy, like Celtic sea salt and those types of things. That's why I recommend that for a lot of people, because it helps get the iodine inside the thyroid follicle. Now, inside that thyroid follicle, what happens is you have these thyroglobulin proteins. They're carrier proteins. But that thyroglobulin is where we start binding some of our thyroid hormones so that they can then turn into T4, which will go into the bloodstream and then get circulated around the body. So here's where those thyroid peroxidase and thyroglobulin antibodies come in. If your body is choosing to attack a thyroglobulin, that's the carrier protein. Now, be careful, I didn't say if your body's attacking itself. Your body's attacking that thyroglobulin protein, then you're going to have anti-thyroglobulin antibodies. And then if you look over here, when you actually start to bind together your T1s, your T2s, your T3s in order to make them into T4, we actually use something called thyroid peroxidase to help us bind those together. So if your body is attacking the thyroid peroxidase, you're going to have anti-TPO thyroid peroxidase antibodies. So those antibodies are specific to where there is a war going on inside your thyroid. Now, I didn't say your body's attacking itself. Your body's attacking the thyroglobulin or the TPO. Now, especially when it comes to thyroid and especially Hashimoto's, the #1 cause of Hashimoto's is actually Epstein-Barr virus. And it's very brilliant because here's what happens. Your body's not attacking your thyroid. Your body is waging a war against something that is stuck in your thyroid, like an Epstein-Barr virus, or like yeast, or like bacteria, or mold, or heavy metals, or any number of things can get stuck or trapped inside that thyroid. And now your immune system's saying, holy crap, there's a bunch of junk in there, let's go fight it off. So then it goes in. So now if your bigger amount of Epstein-Barr or mold or whatever is stuck in your thyroglobulin protein carriers, then your body's naturally going to have more antibodies for that reason. Now, if you have more of that infection or biotoxin stuck over here where your body's actually trying to form your thyroid hormones, well, then you're going to have a more elevated TPO type of an antibody. So all those different antibodies mean is that's a different area of your thyroid and of your thyroid hormones that your body is actually waging a war to. And the question always comes down to not, oh, I have my antibodies elevated, but why are they elevated? Can you find the reason your immune system's triggered? Can you find the reason that happens? Now, in my personal experience, and this isn't across the board because a lot of times you'll have both of those antibodies elevated at the same time or one or the other, but just kind of a general rule is typically if you have those thyroglobulin antibodies, it's usually more of an inflammatory response versus those TPO antibodies have a little bit more of an immune response. So an infection versus something causing inflammation. And again, that is more my clinical experience and kind of seeing case after case after case. That's not across the board, but everybody, say we have 15 people that have Hashimoto's, you guys all probably have 15 different reasons why your antibodies are elevated. So just knowing that you have elevated antibodies is step one. Figuring out why they're elevated is step two. And then also knowing what part of your thyroid is getting the most attack on it is very important. So is it your thyroglobulin or is it your thyroid peroxidase is hugely important because that will also allow you to choose the right things to support thyroid function while you look on the underlying causes of Hashimoto's. Because unfortunately, the medical answer is still just get on thyroid medication. And their only reason they do that is because they say if you have antibodies for too long that keep destroying these areas, eventually, whether you have it now or not, you're going to have hypothyroid because your thyroid's going to continue to get destroyed. So we might as well put you on medication now and avoid that situation from happening. But that medication has zero impact on the actual antibodies or the immune system piece that's going on inside that thyroid. So I know that was a little bit sciencey. I'm going to take you through one more little step of this. So first we needed the iodine and the tyrosine. We need those to bind together. They all get carried around on that thyroglobulin, which is your binding protein. And then all of your iodines and tyrosines get bound together using thyroid peroxidase. Once they're bound together, then your body goes through a coupling. So it takes all of your T1s and T2s and they bind them together because again, the goal is to make mostly T4. Your thyroid makes about 93% T4 and the rest is T3. So your body's making quite a bit of T4 hormone, goes back into that follicle, and then from the follicle through that thyroglobulin carrier protein, it takes only T4 and T3 out into the bloodstream, where again, in the picture, you can see it's mostly T4 and some T3. And then that T4 has to get to the other areas of your body, like your gut and your tissues and your liver, to be converted to T3 to become the active thyroid hormone, which again, we just talked about the antibodies, knowing why and where your body is waging that war. But now seeing that that T4 all has to get converted to T3 in your body, you also know why my answer is not get on thyroid medication, because Synthroid and levothyroxine are only T4, your body still has to be able to convert it to T3, and that is really where most people who have chronic thyroid issues, hypothyroid issues, and Hashimoto's, it has very little to do with your body's ability to make T4, and has everything to do with your body's ability to convert it to T3 and really strengthen and continue to allow that feedback loop from your brain to your body to work appropriately. So I know that was a little science rich, but I hope that makes sense, is where those antibodies are coming from, why we call it that, and why that has an impact on your thyroid, and then that physically your thyroid makes mostly T4, which is just a storage hormone. We need it to convert to T3, which is why testing other areas in the thyroid, like doing the stool sample and the hormones and the adrenals and looking for inflammation, is the actual answer to a thyroid issue, not just looking at a thyroid panel. And I have plenty of other videos that go through that in much more detail about that testing and why it's so important to test other areas of the body when it comes to a thyroid issue. So make sure if you haven't, you go back and watch some of those ones as well, because it makes a very big difference.